What's the probability of you existing? Is it 1 in a million? 1 in a billion? Well, it turns out a group of scientists from Harvard recently tried to figure it out, and they published their findings. It turns out that it's 1 in 10 to the 2.685 millionth power. That's 1 followed by 2.685 million zeros. And again, to give that number a little context, the number of atoms in the human body is 1 in 10 to the 27th power. And the number of atoms on planet Earth is 1 in 10 to the 50th power. And the number of atoms in the known universe is 1 in 10 to the 80th power. So the probability of us existing is a crazy number. And to try to kind of wrap our heads around it even more, imagine this: a city of 2 million people. Each one of those people get a trillion-sided dice. They all roll that dice, and you guessed it, the probability of you existing is that every single one gets the same exact number: 550,343,279,001. That's the improbability that any one of us exist in the first place. And so when you hear a verse like God spoke to Jeremiah, where God says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you," it gives that verse new meaning, because God intended for us to be here. He formed us in our mother's womb based on his knowledge of us. And the truth is that God has known each of us for all eternity. And out of that loving knowledge, he formed us in our mother's womb and called us into creation. You know, this truth really hit home for me in a personal way a few years back. My sister sent me a newspaper clipping over Facebook. Thank God for Facebook. And on this newspaper clipping, I read, "Peoria man miraculously escapes injury." This was in 1962, and I was born in 1974. And that Peoria man was my dad, William O'Hara. And it turns out that he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. His truck stalled out right there on the train tracks, and the Rock Island rocket comes whizzing by and shears off the front engine of his truck, the whole front part of his truck. And as I thought about it, I'm like, I'm about this far from not existing. That was in 1962. At the same time, in 1962, here's a picture of my mom, Sister Jean Michelle. She was a religious sister with the Sisters of Providence in Terre Haute, Indiana. And as these two facts about my history set in, it was as though God put this powerful idea on my heart. He said, "Ryan, I meant for you to be here. I meant for you to be here." And as that sunk in, it was a powerful moment to realize that I am here on purpose, and that if God meant for me to be here, he must have a mission for me while I'm here. You know, I wish each one of us could have the newspaper clippings of the near misses that brought about our existence, to kind of impress on our hearts even more that we are here not just with a purpose, but we are here on purpose, and that God meant for us to be here. God meant for you to be here, and he has a mission for you while you're here. Mark Twain is famously quoted as saying, "The two most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day you figure out why." Now, like many quotes nowadays, some people are saying, "I'm not so sure Mark Twain said that." You know, kind of like the St. Francis quote, "Preach the gospel at all times, and if necessary, use words." I love the sentiment. Our life should proclaim the gospel as much as our words. But some people have said, not so sure St. Francis has said that. And the reason being is St. Francis preached with words to birds. So I think he would encourage us to preach words to people too. But anyway, I digress. So we can have a little fun with this we can have a little fun with this Mark Twain quote. Let's imagine it from a Catholic perspective. The two most important days in your life are the day you were baptized and the day you figure out why. Because when you were baptized, you were made a son or daughter of God. You were freed from the effects of original sin, that you were made a temple of the Holy Spirit, and that you were given a mission. You were given a unique role to play in the redemption of the whole world. That was all embedded within your baptism, and that still is alive and true for each of us today. And so, why is it that we are here? What role are we supposed to play in the redemption of the whole world? Well, Jesus gives us a bit of a roadmap right from the start. In the Gospel of Luke, as he calls his apostles to himself, he says this, "Come, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." Now again, we're so familiar with this statement, we don't even think a whole lot about it. But it's kind of an unusual statement if we think about our experience of what it means to follow Jesus, to be his disciple. Do we always associate discipleship and mission? Usually, I think we would say, Jesus would have said something more like, "Come follow me, and I'll make you a nice person." Or, "Come follow me, and I'll help you in your prayer life." Or, "Come follow me, and I'll make you holy." Well, that's more like what we associate with discipleship. But to be a disciple isn't simply to follow the leader. It's actually to pattern our life after the life of the leader. And what was one thing that is most true about Jesus? Jesus was always in loving pursuit of other people and what's best for them. Jesus was always willing to call people into relationship with his heavenly Father. Jesus always noticed the person and invited them deeper. This is what was always true of Jesus' life. And as we pattern our life after his, it should be true of our life as well. He says, "Come follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." And so what he's doing is bringing discipleship and mission together right from the start. It was always one thing. To be a disciple is to share your faith with others. And to share your faith with others, you've got to be a disciple and in relationship with God. And so discipleship and mission aren't two calls. They're one call. In fact, Pope Francis would say that all of us are called to be missionary disciples. And so right from the start, and even today, we see this missionary urgency connected to discipleship. It's one call, not two things. And that's true in this archdiocese as well. Archbishop Dunn has set forth a new initiative that matches this coming together of being a missionary and of being a disciple. The invitation for each of us is to be inviters just like Jesus, to invite others into a deeper relationship with Christ. It could be people in our neighborhoods, people in our churches, people right there in our pews. Would you be willing to take the risk in relationship to invite others into a deeper relationship with God? Would you be willing to accept that mission and accept that call and put yourself out there in relationship, maybe with someone you know or maybe someone you don't know so well, to invite them into a deeper relationship with Christ? As we pattern our life on the life of Jesus, this discipleship and mission come together as one. And that's what Archbishop Dunn hopes that you will be praying for and investing in and inviting others into. And as we consider an invitation or a request like this, we have to consider, how will this work in our life? And if there's anything that I've learned in evangelization over the last number of years, it's that there are always obstacles to having evangelization be a priority in our life. And the church knows this. In fact, Pope Paul VI wrote a profound document, really one of the strongest documents in the church on evangelization from the last century, Evangelization in the Modern World, Evangelii Nuntiandi. And he wrote this, and in this paragraph, you can see, and he kind of names the challenges that we will experience. Listen to this. He writes, "It would be useful if every Christian and every evangelizer were to pray about the following thought. Men can gain salvation also in other ways, by God's mercy, even though we do not preach the gospel to them. But as for us, can we gain salvation if through negligence or fear or shame, what St. Paul called blushing for the gospel, or as a result of false ideas, we fail to preach it?" So there's a lot at stake, whether or not we choose to evangelize. And he names 4 obstacles that get in the way. And these 4 obstacles I've experienced in my own life. I imagine you have too. And that first obstacle is negligence. We are so darn busy. It's just something that we neglect to do. And like anything in life, as we're super busy, we have to make it easier on ourselves to get those things done. For instance, if you want to work out first thing in the morning, one of the things that can help is you put your workout clothes aside the night before. And so first thing in the morning, you have all of your workout clothes ready to go right from the jump, and you're more likely to get that workout in. So you pre-decide certain things ahead of time. And so when it comes to inviting someone to a parish evangelization program, you need to pre-decide a few things. Who is it that you're going to ask? What is it that you're going to say? And when will you ask them? And so if you can pre-decide each of those things and plan on the date and time that you're going to reach out to this person, there's a much greater likelihood it will actually get done. Because what I've seen is that an invitation like this doesn't just happen by accident. It's something that we have to intend to do, especially if it's the sort of thing that we are not in great practice doing generally. And I think that's true when it comes to evangelization in the Catholic Church. It's not something we're super comfortable with. So we have to give ourselves the greatest opportunity to succeed. So when it's something that we might normally neglect, let's predetermine a few important factors so that it makes it easy for us to do it when it comes time. The second major obstacle is fear. We're afraid. If we want to see the results that we haven't seen before, we're going to have to do something that we haven't done before. And the thing that we have done and have invited others to, is a social thing at the parish, a parish picnic, or a sacramental thing. We're getting our child baptized. We'd love for you to join us. We feel pretty comfortable inviting people to social or sacramental things, but we don't always feel comfortable inviting people to spiritual things, especially if we're not sure how they're going to respond. The truth is that courage is not the absence of fear. It's acting in spite of our fear. And this is the courage that is necessary in this situation. To take a risk, to believe in the mission of the gospel enough to take a risk in relationship, to take a risk of someone saying no. And the truth is, we won't know how it will turn out unless we try, and unless we act in spite of that fear. And so it's good to acknowledge that, and it's good to pray and to ask God for strength and for courage. God will help you in that. The third obstacle is shame, or what Pope Paul VI referred to as blushing for the gospel. He gets that from St. Paul's letter to the Romans, where he says, "I'm not ashamed of the gospel. It's the power of God for the salvation of everyone who believes." And it's not that we're embarrassed by God or Jesus or anything like that. It's just that we're not really sure what all the fuss is about. Is it really that important? And I think this comes down to a misunderstanding of how good the good news really is. You see, there are 3 kinds of good news. There's good news for me, which is something that applies to my life and my life alone. The baby's healthy. I got the job. They accepted the offer on the house. Or there's the second kind of good news, which is good news for we. This is something that applies to many more people than just one. we all got the bonuses at the end of the quarter. Our team won the championship. Or, in the case of all of the Allied countries, World War II was over and the Allies won. This was something that many people celebrated as good news. But then there's this third kind of good news. It's not good news for me. It's not good news for we. It's good news for all. And there's really only one kind of good news that fits into that category. And this good news, the good news of our salvation in Jesus Christ, applies to all, literally everyone, anyone who has ever lived and anyone who will live. And it doesn't just apply to everyone who has lived, it applies to every aspect of their lives for everyone who has lived. This is the good news that we are messengers of, and that we are witnesses to, and that you would be making an invitation to someone else to hear more about this good news. The fourth and final obstacle that Pope Paul VI lays out is the obstacle of false ideas. There's a lot of things that we believe about evangelization that simply aren't true. Like, well, that's for like the super involved people, or that's something that the priests and the staff are supposed to do. Or, is this even a Catholic thing? I didn't think we sort of talked about our faith in public. Lies, lies, and more lies. And the only way that we can move forward in the face of these false ideas is to listen to the truth, is to inspect the Gospels, to read the New Testament, to look at the lives of the saints, to see what the popes have been saying to us throughout history and certainly in our time right now. And if you listen to Pope Francis, this is the urgent need of our times, to be missionary disciples. And so these false ideas need to fall by the wayside to come to the truth that this is the core of who we are as followers of Jesus. One of the church's encyclicals, it says that the church exists to evangelize, that this is her very identity. And so we're a part of that. We're swept up into that. And while it may not be easy, we have to set aside these false ideas that would tell us this really isn't what we're supposed to be doing. In fact, it is the very thing that we're supposed to be doing, especially if we expect the mission of the church to continue and the church to be alive and well, thriving into the future. 30 years ago, I stopped going to Mass. It was my freshman year at William Jewell College. No one was around making sure that I had to go, and I just stopped going. And slowly I drifted away from all practice of my Catholic faith that I had grown up with. Except if it wasn't for one personal invitation that came from a committed missionary disciple, I'm not sure where I would be today. And that missionary disciple, back in 1992, 93, 94, his name was Stephen Porter. He was an RA on my residence hall floor. And while I was into bad grades, bad beer, bad relationships, Jesus Christ was the most important part of his life. And he would invite me week after week, week after week to a Bible study. And I would say week after week, no thanks. And this continued even for a couple of years until my junior year when he did a really smart thing. He invited my girlfriend to a retreat. And I thought, okay, a retreat, I get that. I wasn't really sure about Bible studies, but a retreat I get. And my girlfriend's going. So I went. And on that retreat, I heard that I should love the Lord with all of my heart, mind, soul, and strength. And that resonated with me. It was a missing part of my life. I wanted something bigger than what I was currently living for. And I went home after that retreat and called the person that was most important to me. I called my mom. And I grew up really without a dad because he contracted Alzheimer's disease when I was 5 and would die just a few years after this conversation that I'm referring to. So my mom was the closest relationship in my life. And I shared with her that I wanted to put God first, but she was the most important relationship in my life. And she said something that I'll never forget. She says, Ryan, I'm grateful for that. Thank you. I'm honored. But I want you to put God first in your life. I want to give you permission to center your life around a relationship with God. And I'll never forget that permission that she gave me that day. And while my life didn't change overnight, a few things did change. I began being a part of a men's group, learning how to pray and reading and studying the Bible. But most importantly, I went back to Mass. I went to confession. And my experience of my relationship with God up until that point was kind of like watching a small black and white television. And now all of a sudden, this truth that exploded in my heart that began to change my life, it was like watching full color, high definition, widescreen TV. Everything looked different in my life. And maybe, I'm not sure where you're at. I'm not sure where you're at in your relationship with God. But I want to give you that same permission to put God first in your life and to give him permission flowing out of that relationship to lead you on mission, to give you the courage, the confidence, and the hope to invite others into that relationship as well. It's been an honor and a joy to be with you. I will continue to pray for your archdiocese, in particular in this mission that the Archbishop has laid out for your local church in this coming season. May Jesus bless you and lead you each step of the way.